What's going on, my freaks, geeks, and free thinkers out there? Today's episode is pretty fucking cool. I was really excited to have this guy on. He'd reached out to me right after my first appearance on Tinfoil Hat. It was the first person actually to ever reach out and say they wanted to be on the show. His name is Phil Goodrich. He is a professional surfer, professional artist. You know, he sells his artwork on the internet, and it was very interesting. I really suggest that you guys check out his art. It's awesome. And even his videos of surfing, the guy rips. But besides that, his life is interesting. And when Clint and I started this podcast, not the Free Thinkers, but the original one, it was we wanted to inspire people to get out of the matrix. That was our original idea of a podcast, and then the Free Thinkers Society kind of morphed into something else, but that was the original idea.
Well, the no carnival parking morphed into the podcast for the comedy club.
Yeah, right. So, but when we were putting our heads together, Clint and I, we kind of came up with the idea that we really wanted to talk to a lot of our friends that got out of the 9 to 5, and that was the premise. And we're still gonna do that. We're going to still bring on people that figured out how to break the matrix, let's just call it, and do what they love. And doing what you love, in my opinion, doesn't mean that you're a millionaire. It just means that you don't hate what you're doing. To me, you win if you get paid to do what you love and you get by. Everyone doesn't have to be Joe Rogan.
And you don't want to shoot yourself.
You don't want to shoot yourself. Okay. Hey, man, how many people do you know, Clint, that have a ton of money and are miserable?
A lot.
And how many people do you know?
But it's fine. They make antidepressants for that. So you can still make your $150,000 and take your antidepressants. That's fine. Yeah.
Dick doesn't work. Just take Blue Chew. No, I'm just kidding. Or Viagra. But whatever. But, right, man? And what about another theme that you and I talk about all the time? Like, yeah, the pandemic sucks. Everyone got put in their room, put in their bed. But we've made the best out of it. We've had fun. We've had some great ideas. This podcast spawned from it. But my point is that it's just it's a different lens. It's a different lens, and I really want to make sure we keep having guests on because that was important. That whole idea was important for us, you know, because I know you've done it yourself with writing, comedy. I've done it with throwing the shows and all that stuff, and we just really want to inspire others to break free. Whenever you can, you know, and it doesn't mean, sometimes it means, sometimes it means staying up really, really late, or doing it while you have the job, whatever it is. But, we just really want to, my goal, and I think yours was too, is just to inspire, right? Inspire somebody.
Yeah. They inspire people or let them know that you don't have to be miserable. You can do something you enjoy and, get by, and maybe you don't have that Jaguar to rub in your friends' faces, but you're happy. So that's, I think, is better.
And I know I'm blanking right now. I didn't take my what's Joe Rogan cell? I didn't take my alpha brain today.
I also didn't take any psilocybin mushrooms either, so I'm slow as well.
But my point was, another point I wanted to make was how many rich people were miserable when we were really in the lockdown, when you couldn't leave your house. For me, I know a ton of people that were in their penthouse suites losing their fucking minds.
That's what I was gonna say.
You know. Well, this was fun, Clint. Anything else? Anything going on?
We gotta plug Hero Soap. So everybody go check out Hero Soap. And we actually do have a discount code on there. It's just Free Thinkers with an S at the end. Hero Soap is locally sourced and made in Arizona. It's owned by an Air Force veteran. Your first order, they will match and send to deployed troops. And also there's no harsh or illegal fragrances or parabens that the FDA has decided will shrivel your testicles into tiny little nuts and make you bend to the government's will and do whatever they say.
Yeah. You think fucking soap you think fluoride can fuck you up? Wait till you fucking find out what you put in your soap.
Yeah, and you rub on your nuts, bro.
Yeah.
So go to Hero Soap. You smell delicious. Mike smells like a fucking forest right now. He has the woods. He smells like a forest.
Yeah. I mean, no, but Hero Soap, it's the real deal. I love it. I got to order more because
I was gonna say I'm about there too.
Yeah, I've used up what they gave us. I got to order more. I love it. I love what they stand for, and we would never plug something that sucks. But yeah, I love Hero Soap. And then also, guys, I want to say the Dojo of Comedy, the East Coast edition, is rocking. It's rocking. If you live in the New Jersey area, if you live in the New York area, because there's really not clubs going on in New York City, come out to the dojo. You can watch Clint sling jokes. You could watch some legends have been popping in on Wednesdays. I mean, big names, local legends. I think this weekend we have Rich Voss here, which is amazing.
Bob Levy. Bob Levy was last week with Dave Landau from the Anthony Cumia show. This week we got Bob Levy again with Rich Voss, two New Jersey legends. So, I mean, that's pretty hefty Wednesday. Yeah, some big shows booked, guys. Definitely check it out. Come say what's up. Check out a show. They have been going really fast. So if you do want to buy a ticket, buy them quick because obviously with the restrictions, we're not allowed to have nearly as many people in the audience that we would normally have. They've been so much fun. We love it. To all of our Swarm listeners, I hope you enjoy this episode. It was a lot of fun. Doodling in Etruscan. Addicts of drugs not yet synthesized, black marketeers of World War III, excisers of telepathic sensitivity, osteopaths of the spirit, investigators of infractions denounced by bland paranoid chess players.
But I can't describe enough how primitive it gets out on the island where we are.
Do the locals surf? Because that seems like a big expense, right? If they don't even have...
They don't. No. Like, where we are we're just south of Nias. In this, as you go out from Sumatra, there's little satellite islands that get smaller and smaller, right? Mm-hmm. So on Nias Island, which is to the north of us, there's some locals there, and they surf incredibly well. They're like Balinese locals.
Cool.
On those two islands, you have professional level surfers. But to the south, where we are, it's even more primitive, and there are no surfers. So,
wow.
And that's a whole nother story. Like, there's a few kids that they take the broken surfboards from the tourists and they kind of just ride them like boogie boards.
Yeah.
But then the owner, it's a long story. The owner of the resort where I work, it's sort of like a moral conundrum because if we were to give them a surfboard, they don't really understand how valuable they are, and they just see us as just people who are on eternal holiday. And so it's kind of a long story.
Oh, okay.
But yeah.
Yeah, no, I was just, that's so wild to me. That's wild. And then there's so many different reasons why that's so wild to me. But one of them is another thing that Clinton and I have been doing to the best of ours, and I've been the best we can. I'm trying to encourage anybody else around me. Is like, it seems like you took a horrible situation that is COVID and turned it into something you'll never ever probably get to do again. You know, that you have that to yourself. I mean, that's priceless, and that probably will never happen again, right? I mean, when would you ever?
I don't know if it's going to happen next year too. Like, the way things are going, Australia is even more locked down than we are.
I've heard.
And 90% of the guests at this resort that I work at are from Australia.
Oh, wow.
The owner is Australian, so we really don't know. I mean, I'll go back next year because I can get a work visa.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Yeah, like you said, it may never happen again.
Yeah.
And we were just pinching ourselves.
Right.
I mean, it was bad for business.
Yes.
For him, but I mean, I don't own the resort, so I was just there trying to enjoy it, and like you said, try to make the best of it. And the way I found you guys, like, we turned off the Wi-Fi because we have satellite Wi-Fi at the resort.
Mm-hmm.
So we had to turn it off because it's a little bit expensive. So he was trying to cut costs.
Yes.
So the way we would get internet is you could hike up about 1.5 miles to this one certain spot on the island, and you could get like 3G. You could hold your phone up and get a couple bars of 3G. So everything, like, because you had to walk there and kind of like plan it out, everything got compartmentalized. So it was like, okay, I gotta check in with the wife, then you would check the swell forecast, and then I already was a fan of podcasts, but then I got even more into getting my information about COVID and politics from podcasts, because I don't know, it just seems like I was learning more from that than from just
I'm sure
the average, the average news that they try to pump down your throat. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I'm trying not to laugh too much like that. Your only glimpse into civilization is Sam Tripoli screaming power lizard people.
No,
but
that wasn't the only one. That's just how I discovered. That's how I discovered you guys. Because
I know. It's just in my mind, just thinking of you like standing there with a cell phone, and the only thing coming in is Sam talking about lizards.
He's always like, "Oh my god!" That list that he has.
I love it.
But it is funny.
Oh, he's so funny.
That's how I found you guys, because you were on with Tommy G.
Yes.
And him, and like, it's funny because my personality, I think, is more like you, where like normally when you're in a conversation, you might get like steamrolled a little bit, like you did on that podcast. But when they did toss it to you, it seemed like you were more relaxed and measured in what you had to say, and it spoke to me more. Like,
cool, man.
I mean, I like the information, and I like how Tommy G speaks and how Sam speaks, but it wouldn't be someone that I'd be hanging out with at a bar, And that's kind of what I like about podcasts. You can eavesdrop in on these conversations that you would normally maybe never get to be a part of. You know what I mean?
Yeah, man. Clint really pushed me into this. I had I'd make every excuse of why we couldn't do it. We were building the studio above the club forever, and then COVID came. We were very close to getting it, and like we were ready to start recording, then COVID came, and at that point we really thought it was this crazy, scary pandemic. At least I did. I'm not going to speak for Clint. At least I did. I was definitely a little bit of a whack job in the beginning. I'm not going to lie.
I was roped in too. I could use my hanky over my face, and I was like,
I bought a biohazard suit. I stocked up on ammo. I was definitely freaking out. But then this studio was half ready. I mean, like 85% ready to go, and it was done. And we were rocking and rolling with the club because Clint is also a comedian, and everything was great, and everything stopped. And after a couple of weeks of feeling bad for myself, Clint's like, "Well, we are just going to start the podcast on Zoom," and I'm like, "No," and I come up with all the reasons why, because I'm a little bit of a perfectionist at sometimes, and I'm just thinking it just gets in my way. It's just an excuse is what I'm learning more. And thank God this guy pushed me. And then, I'm friends in real life with Sam and Tommy. And we would, while this was going on, the three-way phone calls that we would have should have been podcasts. I mean, they'd be 2-3 hours long. And most of the time, Sam, because of the babies, would have to get off. But we would have these just crazy conversations on what's going on. We'd be analyzing pictures. We got this picture of a celebrity. Look it over here. It doesn't match. And we'd have these. So we almost were podcasting without podcasting. So then those guys who have a huge audience asked me to be on. And Clint has been in my ear like, we have to start the podcast already. And Sam was like, if you're going to come on my podcast, you have to have something to tell people to catch you on.
Exactly.
So we started. We took that first step, which is the hardest thing, man. I mean, you're doing your thing, and I love the whole. I say exit the matrix. Maybe that's a little corny, but it is true. Like, some people, and I don't want to shit on those people because it's normal. They have to work a 9 to 5. You got to pay your bills. I've done it. Clint has done it. But just to inspire people to just take that first step and work really, really hard, so you don't have to do what basically you're told to do in society. Like this, you're a little worker bee. Instead, I mean,
Exactly.
you just telling me about it threw me off a little bit, but I love it about surfing and how you have one of the best waves in the world at your footstep. I mean, that seems like a dream, man.
It was.
A simple little one for myself was like, I don't get enough time with my kids, and I was with them for 4 months every single day. It was so cool, like I was outside just playing in the yard. Like, I have to cram it into my Sundays or a half a day Monday. And like the fact that it was just weeks and weeks, and we started this podcast and built even stronger relationships with comedians. The New York, we're in New Jersey. We're right outside. You throw a rock to Manhattan. That's how close we are. But, and I get it now that, but the New York comics would never come here because, why? And now I get it. They have 7, 8, 9 clubs they could just bounce around and not have to go over the bridge or the tunnel to get here. But now we have relationships with New York comics. I mean, so many there's been so many I know that's a corny thing, but there's been so many silver linings in this thing. Don't get me wrong. The world is, we're not in the best shape. Hopefully enough people keep waking up with conversations like we're having and others. And I'm a firm believer, I don't know where you stand on this, but people can change our thoughts, our actions as a whole in humanity. We could change. So hopefully that this is going to get away from them as well, because there's so many more open dialogue and people are talking about great things and inspiring people, and maybe we can actually change for the better. But as far as like using the time of COVID, man, I it's going to be one of those things we're going to like romance looking back. I believe, like, wow, remember that 3 months of waking up with your kids every day, you walking outside and surfing the best wave ever just at your footstep. So, I think everything's perspective, right, Phil?
It really is.
Right?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And if you stop and slow down, and if you look at the world the way it's going, you can take it two ways. Like you're talking about. Like, I never imagined that I'd have to wear a mask on an airplane, or even now in South Carolina. I thought when this broke off in March, I thought, well, it'll never happen where I live, because where I live, it's like Trump country, man. I mean, that could be a good or a bad thing depending on where you land. But I know for me, I'm in the middle politically, and I know people don't believe that exists.
It does. It definitely does.
I think it does. Like, I voted for Gary Johnson back in 2016, which is fine. I mean, he had no chance, and everyone's like, "Oh, that's just a vote for whoever," Yep. But to your point, if you stop and look around, you can look at it two ways. It's either like, I can't believe what's happening. This is crazy. This is insane. People are losing their mind with COVID. Or you can stop and pivot like you guys are doing. Like, I don't know all that much about you and Clint, but I mean, Clint was a freestyle motocross, and then your career can only last so long in a sport like that, because what it does to your body and the risk, and there's only so much room at the top for the elite riders, so if you can either become bitter and fold your arms, or you can like embrace what you can do. Podcasting, comedy. I can't even imagine the balls it takes to stand up beginning off in comedy and like, oh, I'm gonna make people laugh, like to me that's 100 times more scary than surfing over shallow reef. I don't have kids, but I mean, I understand the concept. I got dogs and I got a wife that I'm really close to. So like, you can use this time. It's like an open opportunity to like capitalize on what's happening.
Yes.
Like you said.
Yes. Well, most big changes in people that go from, poor to rich or make big moves usually happens in a downturn, and they see where they can take advantage, or at least, not, just flounder like a lot of the rest of the people.
Yeah. And I just think it's been a theme lately, and I just feel like there's been so many coincidences, which there's no such thing in my opinion either. But that first step is so important. It's just that first step is the hardest step in anything. So if it's getting out of the 9 to 5, if it's pursuing your career in art, if it's whatever it is that calls to you, and it's the thing that you want to do, There's never been a better time, in my opinion, to focus on it and do it. Yeah, I mean, if you have anxiety and all that stuff, yeah, it could get scary for sure. If you're losing your job or you can't pay your bills. But hey, one thing that's kind of interesting with this situation is literally we are all in the same boat. So that's I've had businesses that caught fire, flooded out, and it was like just me. So it was more of a pity party. This is like, hey, this is affecting everyone, and how can you take advantage of it? But just to your story, do you mind me asking you some questions? I think it's really cool. Like just the tinfoil hat in me. I have to. I can't let you get by this without asking a few questions. So it says your dad worked for NASA. Can I ask you some stuff about that? Is that cool?
For sure, man. You can ask me anything.
Awesome.
That's what I crave. I crave honesty.
Cool. Okay. So how was that? Like, how was that? Like, my dad works for NASA. Like, what? That's so cool. Is it?
Yeah, it really was cool growing up. Not only did he work for NASA, and I mean, he's basically, I mean, you could say he's a rocket scientist, but to be more accurate, he's more like a project engineer. He'd manage the people that run software and hardware, and he'd bring them together. More specifically, like to stabilize rocket fuel when it was on the ground. He would bring together the projects and like robots that would spray the tiles on the space shuttle. They had to spray this toxic chemical onto the tiles of the shuttle so it wouldn't burn up coming through the atmosphere. So my dad, he's still alive. He's not working at NASA anymore, but growing up, he was the one that got me into surfing. We were in Florida, and he had this friend at work, and I think he kind of had like, when nerds kind of have like a man crush on the cool guy at work, and this guy happened to surf. And so I was like 9 or 10 years old, and he came home from work one day, and he's like, "Hey, son, what do you think about surfing? Would you like to start surfing?" And I was like, "Yeah, cool, sounds great." So it was like my dad and his friend got me into surfing.
Wow.
And so, yeah, I mean, it just really worked out because we lived right by the ocean.
And you happen to live in this spot where Kelly Slater's from, right?
Exactly. And same age, too.
Wow.
It was like I came up when he was coming up. And, yeah, it's a pretty unique place. I mean, you guys have heard of Cocoa Beach, but then to the south, there's like 6 little beach communities that are right next to each other.
Yeah.
And the epicenter is at this wave called Sebastian Inlet. And there's just this wave, I guess it's a bit like Manasquan Inlet over in Jersey where you guys have, where this wave kind of bounces off the jetty, and it makes it more dynamic, the wave. The shape of the wave is affected by the jetty. And so, yeah, that's where we came up, like Kelly Slater, CJ Hobgood. And then there's like 10 or 15 guys you wouldn't have heard of, but just absolutely rip. They're just murderers in the water, but yeah, they didn't make it onto the WSL tour.
It's interesting, man. I've been thinking lately so much about how scenes, let's call them a scene, or the early days, like it just happens, right? Where all of a sudden a bunch of comedians are all young in this one area.
Well, that's what I was actually just going to ask. Like, how much... And I semi know the answer. I mean, with I heard, was Kelly not like like somewhat of a prodigy as a young kid too?
Oh, for sure. I mean, we were fans from the first time I saw him. He was competing from the time he was like 6. I didn't get into competition until I was like 12 or 13. And we would be on the beach watching him like fans. And I mean, from the beginning, it was just like, this guy is going to be...
He was like Shaun White. You know how Shaun White was like as a little teeny kid, everybody knew who Shaun White was already.
Okay, wow.
But how much do you think that having that one person there, like how many professional level surfers came out of that little teeny area in Florida?
Gosh.
A bunch, right?
A bunch, yeah. And it was because... I think because he raised the level.
Exactly where I was going with that.
Yeah, it's probably the same with like freestyle motocross and even I mean, even more obscure with comedy. You know, you have one killer that comes in,
Yeah.
and then other people, it's just like you see what's possible.
Exactly, Clinton.
And if you can relate to people, I say it all the time. When I first got into freestyle, all I saw was people in magazines or on videos, so it was hard to relate to them because I didn't know them on a personal level. But once you start going to events and you actually meet people and you have conversations with them and hang out with them, and you're just normal people, then you watch them do something. Now all of a sudden in your head there's like a switch where you're like, oh, like maybe I can, do this.
Yeah. I think it's like that. It's a combination as well too. Like there's like a little bit of luck or whatever going on too. I mean, if you guys look back and you see like, I forget, I think it's in California, you'll see like high school where it's like Tom Morello and like some of the Chili Peppers and some of the members of Tool. Like, and they're all like in the same high school. You're like, what the? This is crazy, man. This is so cool. But it's like, and that's not. I mean, who knows? Maybe someone ripped on the guitar. I don't know, and it brought it up. But definitely raises the bar if you're around someone. That's probably true.
Well,
too,
even
right?
the thought process, like what's the difference between a lot of people? But thinking you can and knowing you can, or believing you can. You know what I mean? That's a lot of the times the difference between people that are just a amateur level guy and somebody that then believes in themselves that they can take it to the next level and become a professional. That's
really cool. I really never thought about it. You have a prodigy, let's call it, how it could change a whole. It could change an entire genre or whatever sport. Doesn't matter.
Well, I mean, that's the whole.
That's so cool. Like
that's
one
the
person
whole
can raise the bar.
That's the whole ghetto thing, right? Like people that are in a shitty area only see people. The only people that have money like sell drugs or whatever. So that's what they learn. And you never see anybody get out. So that's what you learn. Where in the reverse, if you're around people that are like doing things, you go, oh, well, he can do it, and you get inspired that way too. I mean, all that thing, whether it is energy or whatever is contagious,
Yeah, that's just really cool, man. That one, pretty much one guy inspired all of a group of surfers. And then that's wild. That's really wild. But another a question I always wanted to ask, and I feel comfortable to ask you. It's kind of probably a stupid question, but Phil, so how does it happen that a wave in a certain area, like you said, Manasquan, I guess you said about the jetties, right? But it always blew my mind. Like it's pretty much almost the same wave comes through there. Like, is that what how does that work? That's like. When you watch competitions and like I'm saying the word wrong with like a pipeline. When I was a kid, it was called a pipe, right? A pipeline, or where it's and they're pretty. That wave will run through pretty is that I'm not saying it right, but
that wave, pipeline's breaking over a reef, and it's a shallow reef.
Okay.
And so when the wave comes from deep water and it breaks over it, and it suddenly comes over shallow water. It attracts the energy from underneath the wave. Mm-hmm. And so when it comes from very deep, there's a lot of power coming from the deep water swell. And when it explodes onto a shallow reef, then it slows down from the energy in the bottom. But then the lip is still tall, the top of the wave, and it pitches out. And that's how you get the hollow barreling waves, like in pipeline. And then out in front of the resort where we are, I don't know if you watched that video I sent, like the little sizzle reel.
I did, yeah.
There's like actually a rock that sticks out, even at high tide, it sticks out of the water. It's that shallow. And so the wave where it's breaking, it's literally from knee high to chest high deep water. And you get like 6 or 8 foot waves breaking over this shallow reef, and that's what causes the barreling part of the wave.
Oh wow! Okay, now that makes perfect sense about the reef, and okay, cool.
And then as far as Manasquan and Sebastian, those have sand bottoms, but the jetties at Sebastian Inlet and Manasquan, they sand collects right next to the jetty, and so you get a shallower sandbar in it, and that can also affect, like when the waves
Okay.
coming from deep water onto shallow water, that can also make a hollow wave or a playful wave. It depends on the contour of the bottom.
Wow. All right. I always wanted to know that. I could have probably Googled it, but why not ask?
Yeah,
it?
it's not a dumb question at all. I mean, if you don't surf, it's. I mean, that's the whole reason that I'm getting paid at this resort now. Is I'm a surf guide, and if you tell someone that, it's like you're a surf guide. It just sounds, I mean, a little bit stupid because surfing is one person, one wave. But the way it is around the resort, there's like 4 other small islands, so you have about 12 different choices of waves. And so every morning you have to read the conditions and make a decision of where to take these guests that are paying, like $300 a day to stay at this resort. And the conditions change depending on the wind and the tide. And so as a guide, you have to wake up in the morning and you have to corral these 10 Australian surfers that are all gung-ho to surf somewhere, and you have to make a call and you have to seem confident about it. And I mean, it really is a job, but you still get to surf. So you're getting paid to surf, and you get to hang out with Australians who are very fun people.
Yes,
in
I have to
general.
agree. I have to agree. Australians are awesome. I don't know what's going on in their country right now. Who knows? Who knows if, I mean, maybe you have firsthand. Is a lot of that stuff true? Because is it true with, have you heard like about the, what is it? They're doing forced vaccination. Have you heard it? Is that actually true? Because sometimes you see stuff on the internet or you.
They haven't started the forced vaccinations, but they are really limiting who can even leave the country and who can come in.
Wow.
And also in certain provinces down in the south, like Victoria, they had an outbreak. And so the government really locked them down to where people in that district, well, I guess it's a state, it's Victoria province.
Yes.
They can't leave within 5 miles of their house. I mean, that was of maybe a week ago. And you probably heard about the pregnant lady that was organizing a protest on Facebook, and the cops showed up preemptively and arrested her. And all that is really true.
That's really happening, right?
And and they've had only deaths, like less than 700 deaths in the whole country. But, the argument they're making for the lockdown is, well, we're not having deaths because we locked down, so it's hard to say. But I mean, I was surprised because normally Australians are such free spirits. I was surprised to hear that they would even accept being locked down.
I feel like it's part of a test, man, to see how much will we allow.
They accepted getting rid of their guns.
Yeah, they sure did. They turned them in. They love to stir up conversations about how violent we are, and
really?
Yeah, it's really interesting in our healthcare too, like because they have
a universal
socialized medicine, But.
Yeah. Well, I this whole thing to me is like a I go deep into all the conspiracies, and I will listen to all of them, and they're all fun to me. This is not so much fun, but I do think this is almost a drill or a test, and just to see how much they could push us. And I think, like my good buddy Sam says, another thing that got away from them. This totally got away from them. I have been saying, and it's funny, I could talk about lizard people and all crazy shit, but whenever I bring this up, people are like, you're crazy, you're nuts. I really believe they're coming down on stand-up comedy and the bars, because I'm around all those people all the time, around people that, and it is this COVID and this lockdown and what the government has done has, in my opinion, brought more people together. The people that I know are left-wing, or left-leaning, I should say, or right-leaning, they all, at this point, very few are sick and tired of it, and have, so I think that's what the whole thing about, like in New York, they can't do stand-up comedy is like old school raves, like they're doing them illegal, like we'll give you the location and a half an hour before, and it's really cool in a way, but it's also terrible. But I think it's because they don't want because most people are saying how it's all bullshit, scamdemic, and saying all that stuff. When people have a couple of drinks in them, they start talking, to each other at the bar about this stuff, and I think people are. I think we got played. I really do. I not that I'm like some revolutionary for saying that, and I think that it was a test to see, okay, how much can you push? I mean, I literally wear the mask that we know it says everywhere when you buy it. This is like a snow or face shield. This is not for viruses, but yet that's accepted. Like everyone knows that. But it's like, okay, just to because you're playing along. But I think it got away from them. I really do. I think people are sick and tired of it, and I think it's another thing that they thought was going. Whoever they are, I don't know, deep state, whatever you want to call they. It's like, what can we get the people to do? I'm definitely nervous. I don't know about you, Phil, but I am nervous, Clint, about November. I am. I think either way, it's going to only go one way or the other, and I feel like no matter what's going to happen, it's not going to be the pretty, or the media is not going to portray it as pretty. So I'm not. I would be lying if I said I'm not a little nervous what's going to happen in November. But
my guess is Trump wins again, and then shit hits the fan.
Yeah.
And then the hardcore.
Really, I have no idea. And I agree with everything you've said so far. I mean, I am obsessed with conspiracy podcasts to the point where what I believe changes day by day. But if nothing else, I think Sam says it a lot. It's just way more interesting to see the world that way, whether it's true or not true.
Mm-hmm.
And with podcasts, you can pause it. You can actually hold people's words up to the light.
Yep.
And spin them around and wait a minute, pause, get on the internet, search that, and don't just stop on Snopes or PolitiFact. There's whole layers of it where
you can't use Google
fact checkers are being funded by Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation.
Yeah.
You can trace the money to these fact checkers, and you can. But going conversely on the other side, you can find all these fringe people where you can't really be sure if that information's true. So you really 100%. Have to stop and I don't know. Like you said, I really enjoy conspiracy podcasts, but you have to be careful, because just when you think something is aha, gotcha, then you really have to you have to be responsible and look into it. And you can find sources that seem credible on both sides, but you're saying, it's just infinitely more interesting who they are. I mean,
who are they?
Who would want to do this? And you have to look at it is this really true? Is Bill Gates this evil genius? Is George Soros?
Mm-hmm.
Does he really want this chaos?
Yeah.
And a lot of things point to yes.
Right.
But you don't want it to be true. You would try to tell that to your family, and even my wife, she doesn't want to hear it. She doesn't. Mm-hmm. I mean, she's not against what I'm learning, but she just doesn't want to know about it, which is cool. I mean, not everyone wants to go down the rabbit hole.
That's very true. I won't mention names, but there's a few comedians, big name comedians that I've spoke to, and they flat out said to me, they hate that shit. Don't bring it up. And it's basically their thing is later on I got to get closer to these guys, and they were like, the reason why he doesn't like it is because it's basically he didn't want to become awakened. He knows there's so much bullshit out there that it's he doesn't even want to take the red pill. Which I kind of, now that I've taken it and it's been a long time, I get it. There's certain mornings that I'm I wish I didn't know any of this shit. I was ignorant, and I could just take my kids to Disney World and enjoy it, and not look at every fucking piece of symbology and all this just so
look at
much
the
shit.
and the Disney logo.
Oh my god, dicks everywhere, and just it's just everywhere. When I was a kid, we when I was in the 90s, I remember seeing the Sex in the Clouds and all this stuff, and we just thought it was a pervert must have just maybe some there's some pervert that thinks he's funny with his friends. That's what I thought. And then when you have the internet and you have all these people doing this research, and you see, okay, this is way deeper than just some pervert that could be hey man, I got Sex in the Clouds at Aladdin. Wait till you see what I just did. No, this shit's crazy. There's no denying that. I mean, Tommy G, I think in particular, broke that whole Wayfair thing. I mean, that's nuts. That whole thing was out of control. I mean, it just gets. But what I want to ask you is, what do you think about this whole flat Earth thing? I mean, you were raised by somebody that works in NASA.
Yeah.
So how do you what do you think about that? Does that make you crazy? Like, oh my God, because that one gets people really upset.
It sure does.
Yeah, that one actually gets people upset.
Yeah. I've had a few conversations with my dad. I mean, I really trust what he has to say, because he worked there and everything. But, I really don't know. I don't think the Earth is flat, and but I can see. I've listened to flat Earth arguments, and I can understand that things aren't always what they seem. But I don't know. I don't get stuck on an argument like that, because I'm never going to go to space. I don't know. It's not my thing. And I remember in 2012, this Brazilian guy at one of the resorts I was working at, surfer guy. He's like, "Oh, your dad works at NASA, man?" And I'm like, "Yeah." He's like, "Ask him if we really went to the moon."
Yeah, there you go.
And I was like, "What? What are you talking about?" Like, I had never considered up until that point that.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay, that's a cool perspective, right? I mean, your dad works for NASA. Why would you even question that? Okay, go ahead, Phil. This is cool.
Yeah. So when I asked my dad about it, he's just like, "What? What are you even talking about?" Like he was the same way. Like, I don't think he's ever considered it. So, I don't know what to think about it. Like, I don't know if you saw Kelly Slater did an AMA, Ask Me Anything, with a lady astronaut that was on the space station while it was in orbit.
Okay.
And you can kind of see like a feed like this, where she was on the space station, he was asking questions.
Okay.
And you could kind of see out the window and the Earth as she's orbiting, but like I just don't know. To your point, I mean, there's so many things that you can go down rabbit holes. I really haven't gone.
That's one that's tricky for me, because when a scientist, I'm not smart enough to compute with it. I'm just going by what they say. If he tells me that's what when they just shut down the arguments of flat Earth, I go with my gut a lot, because I always say all the time, I believe that we are so much stronger and greater creatures than we even know, and I do believe in the gut more than anything. And I go with my gut, and my gut tells me something is up, but I also think my gut also tells me that I believe that this might be another just tool to get us to chase our tails while the real stuff is going on that we're getting too close to. There's too many other things that are uncovering that. The George Soros name is a household name. I mean, there's people that are not into conspiracies that are talking about Soros, right? They're talking about things. So we're getting close. So then psyops, right? That's what a real psyop is. So if we have flat Earth listeners, I'm into all of anything that's out there. I love it. I want to hear about it. I want to learn about it. I'm not shitting on flat Earth. I'm just saying that I believe if there was a psyop, I could totally see that one. And people say, "Oh, well, they banned all the YouTube and all that." Well, exactly. If you want to make it look real, you go after it. You know what I mean? That's my opinion. Possible and I think there's quite a few. I bet you there's psyops that I'm all into. Who knows? I mean, that's part of it. Misinformation and getting you to go down a rabbit hole, waste your time worrying about something like flat Earth, and it gets people angry though. That's what I like it as a troll level. I love it. Like I have. Not all my friends are conspiracy theorists. I hate that word. That's why I would call the free thinkers. But not all my friends think this way. Not all my friends are, I don't hang out in an echo chamber. But when I like to troll a friend and really mess with them, I will put on the dumbest flat Earth video and pretend I'm really into it just to piss them off.
Because they know you're susceptible too. So they're like, "Oh, this is the new thing Mike's into."
Like, I'll find the dumbest one that looks like an 8-year-old made it and be like, "Stop, I'm watching." I've done it quite a few times. They're like, "You really believe this?"
Hey, I have a theory that a conspiracy theory I've never heard anybody say. Do you know any surfers with eczema?
That's a good question.
I guarantee you don't.
I don't think I do.
See?
My wife gets it sometimes, but she doesn't surf. So.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Why aren't we just prescribing salt baths or something?
Wait,
Like,
really?
what's
How did you
going
know
on?
this?
I don't know. Salt heals all kinds of shit. And
How
I'm
did
like,
you-
I guarantee you people that spend that much time in salt water do not get some kind of skin condition like that.
Yeah, it makes
Huh.
sense.
I know personally. I love the ocean. Towards the last month, I haven't made it, but I was making a habit of at least once a week. I feel like it's a battery. As soon as I sit on that sand, get that salt water, like I just get refreshed and recharged. I could go there like so tired, and I don't know. To me, it's just such a battery. I feel like at least my body was meant to be on a beach, have that ocean, have that salt water. It is like a cure-all, if you ask me.
Oh, for sure. It's a major source of oxygen too. When a wave breaks, it's releasing heaps of oxygen when a wave crashes.
That's why all the foam.
Hmm.
Awesome.
And also, it's the largest thing. Like the Earth, our Earth is made up. I don't know what percentage. It's like 80% water. So I mean, if you can go down to the sea and touch the ocean, you're touching the largest thing that you can touch on this planet that we're on, whether you think it's flat or round. But yeah, if you can connect with it, I mean, there's nothing larger, and we haven't even made it to the depths of the ocean. So the mysteries involved, it is really inspiring.
It is. I mean, I think it's amazing to me that we haven't been to the bottom of the ocean, right? So how do we know what is all the way down there? How do we know that that's not where the aliens or the other beings come from? I believe that's probably more so. Like I believe there's all kinds of beings. They could be interdimensional. Who knows? But the ocean's got to be like, to me, it's so wild. Our minds should be so fucking blown that our planet is mostly water, mostly oceans. We haven't explored the entire thing. It's right here, right? I mean, we still like, well, how often do we find a new species? It blows my mind
All the time.
all the time. And it's like wild. It's so wild. I mean, that you could get tripped out just thinking about the ocean. And how the depth of it. Like I said, you could go down rabbit holes of seeing crafts, right? That just, I don't know if you guys ever seen those videos where crafts they emerge from the ocean or go down in the ocean. Crafts, like UFOs. I mean,
yeah.
The videos are always spotty, but they do always seem to like just shoot up out of the ocean or just shoot down into it. I don't know. I think it would. Who knows if it could be military stuff as well? But
easily,
yeah.
Yeah. I don't know what I believe about UFOs, but one time when I was out surfing, it wasn't this year, but it was about 3 years ago, I saw something out of the corner of my eye. And where you sit in the lineup, there's all these small islands that you can see out beyond where you sit. And it was coming on dusk, and out of the corner of my eye, I saw like it was a light pink light, and it hovered down to where I thought it might be a drone, because sometimes boats show up and guys bring their drones to film some surfing.
Yeah.
And it sank behind the island. By the time I caught it and looked over it, it sank behind the island, and I was like, wow, that was really weird. But I didn't think much of it because I was in the middle of surfing. And then just this season, with all my
Oh,
podcasts, I found this one that I just love. I don't know if you've heard of it. It's called Conspiracy Theories and Unpopular Culture, with this guy, Isaac Weishaupt.
Oh, Isaac Weishaupt. I know the name. I know that name. Okay.
I was getting really into his podcast, right? And he's like the Higher Side Chats, where they have like a Patreon feed. And I didn't know if I wanted to pay for it. It probably wasn't that much to be on his Patreon feed, but I just put it out there. Like, I love the way I got my start in my art career. A big part of it was to trade art, either trade art for accommodation or trade art for something I might want to do or be. And that really worked. So I had just heard one of his podcasts that I loved, and I was like, man, I'd really like to hear the second half of this. So I just shot him an email or a private message in Instagram, and I was like, hey man, love your podcast, blah, blah, blah. Would you ever be into trading a Patreon subscription for a painting. Yeah, and he got right back to me, and he's like, yeah, that's a cool idea, whatever. And he's like, hey, have you ever done a UFO? And I was like, nah, but I might have seen one about 2 years ago. And he's like, I like how you do the waves. He's like, why don't you do a UFO, like that scene that you saw?
Yeah.
And so I ended up like trying to recreate what I saw, and he loved it. And so now he's my first podcast that I'm subscribed to. I get the private feeds and this and that. It was really fun. It was a fun little project.
That's awesome. I think I saw a UFO a couple of times, but I think it might have been a military drone. It had to be. So I was, it was a few years ago, after an ayahuasca ceremony. We were all on the,
Oh, of course you saw.
No. It was like after the ceremony, a bunch of other people that were there. We drove to a beach. It was actually, it was the next day now, and the sun was going down, but it couldn't have been it's a UFO because it's an unidentified flying object for sure. I don't know if I wouldn't call it alien, but guys, it was the biggest, three of the biggest drones, I guess you'd call them, I've ever seen in my life. Like almost the size of a plane, maybe bigger, and they were in perfect unison, the three of them, like that, almost that triangle, and the way they were moving, it was so weird. And then phew, they were gone.
And that was in Jersey?
No, this was in, I guess I could say Florida. I try to keep it hidden where those ceremonies were, but yeah, in Florida. This was in Florida.
Okay. Yeah.
But I think all those shamans left that area anyway now. But yeah, it was, it was crazy. It was like silent. You didn't hear them. I mean, it had to be military drone because it just looked like if you took, it's just wild. And then I saw in Arizona, I definitely saw some kind of craft, or it could have been military, but it was more of the traditional kind of, what do you say, like disc type thing.
Yeah.
But it's I also think it's really cool that you traded your art for a podcast. I love where we're headed, man. I feel like Hollywood is done. People are podcasting everywhere. It's such a cool time. Like you just hit up a person on a podcast, right? Then he gave you, like when we were younger, you could never have access to somebody you admired, whether it was their music or their art. Like that's another really cool part of this world that we're in right now. And
so true.
It's so awesome, man. I mean, like, blows my mind. But back to your story, man. So, you went through a dark time, right? And things were rough for you. And, which that's where I got a little choked up because unfortunately I lost a lot of my friends to drugs. A lot. Right. Most of most of my good friends from the past and the ones that I did a lot of amazing creative projects with are gone. They didn't make it through that dark time. And I saw that you went through that and you lost a friend and it was that dark. So why don't you tell us? Why don't you just tell me a little bit or you feel comfortable talking about and then the spark that kind of.
Yeah, well, that's a long story, but I'll tell you, like, going even further back to my dad, and UFOs and NASA, at the same time when he brought home that surfboard, he was getting into Christianity. Mm-hmm. And he got really into it, like born again, still is,
Yeah.
And I was young enough to where he came home one day and got into my record collection. I was into rock and roll records. It was funny. It's like hair metal, like Rat and Twisted Sister or whatever. And at that time, in the mid-'80s, it was right in the middle of that. I don't know if you've ever heard of it, but they called it Satanic Panic.
Oh, I remember. For sure.
And so he found all these rock and roll records. And he was like, son, this music is from the devil. And he brought it out to the garage and he sawed each one of them in half with a jigsaw, right?
Wow.
And the next thing you know, I'm enrolled in Bible studies and they're telling me this and that and it really affected me, like to where I got scared about what happens when you die.
Oh wow. Okay.
And I became a Christian too.
Mm-hmm.
and I tried to keep it up through my teen years, and that was whatever struggle.
Mm-hmm.
But by the time I went to university and moved out to San Diego, I was still trying to live that way, but I've always been attracted to that little bit of darkness and like what's on that other side, and kind of tempting fate and danger and dark music and like Black Sabbath.
Mm-hmm.
And like, this is a long and winding story, but something happened at this surf spot, this really localized surf spot where the university that I was enrolled in, it sits right on a cliff, Sunset Cliffs in San Diego.
Mm-hmm.
And there's this spot that's just really localized by these older guys that are just angry if anyone comes around. And I would surf there alone, and they would just constantly yell at you and just get out of here, blah, blah, blah. I don't know if you're familiar with localism and surfing.
Just from the movies, but yeah.
Yeah. But anyway, after about 7 years of it, I got into a fight with one of the locals, and I don't know if you can see me, but I'm about 6 feet tall and 140 pounds, featherweight.
Yeah.
And I made the wrong decision to fight the guy, and I got stomped out really bad.
Yeah.
And the rest of the guys came in. They broke my board, and it was a life-changing experience.
Mm-hmm.
I got my ass kicked.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of sent me on this downward spiral of like really angry and upset and dark. And I took this turn like in San Diego, and I started going to this dive bar, and I met this dude that was like, he was kind of fascinating guy. He was like this really dark guy that seemed, and we kind of got into the same things at the same time, like it was around the time like mid 90s, Kurt Cobain and grunge and Black Sabbath and all. And after that fight, I got into this really downward spiral where like, next thing I know, he's like, "Hey, you ever smoke heroin?" And for some reason I was like, "Nah, let's do it." Just making decisions like that, just on a dime,
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And then that led to I was like, "Man, this is kind of lame. You ever shoot it?"
Yeah.
And
the surfers got to take it to the extreme.
Yeah. And next thing you know, 2 years of my life gone by, and it was like about as dark as it gets.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah.
Yes, but you pulled yourself out of it, man.
I did, but he didn't.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was the one that was funding most of it. He was heating and air conditioning guy.
Yeah.
So he always had like rolls of cash.
Yeah.
And when that happened, when he purposely OD'd himself, yeah, that was heavy.
I lost my best friend the exact same way, man. So I totally could relate to you. That's hard. It's really hard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that being said, ironically enough, that was sort of the turning point where right around 9/11, my dad called me and he's like, "Hey, I found this savings bond that I forgot about, and it's in your name. It's worth $1,200, and you have a passport here. You should get out of there. Like, do something else." I've always been honest with him what I was going through.
Yeah.
And at that same time, I had a friend that just got back from Indonesia, and he told me all about his trip. And that was right after 9/11. And I took that savings bond and I just bought a ticket. And I was still surfing through that whole dark period, but it was different,
Mm-hmm.
And that started, just having that moment, that pivot, and that savings bond and the passport, that opened up this whole second chapter, this last 20 years in Indonesia.
It's amazing.
Does that make sense?
It makes a lot of sense, and I really hope, even if one person just gets inspired by that story, once again, it's just a lot of, like, I mean, it's language. We got to use certain words. Coincidence, not coincidence, but his dad finding that at the wrong time, and he just takes that first step again. A lot of buzzwords I know we're using, guys, but it's just true. He takes that first step. He goes to Indonesia, and Phil, I mean, I know we just talked about some heavy stuff, but you're living a good life, man. I don't think life is measured in I don't know your financial situation, but to me, like, as I get older, life is not measured in zeros in bank accounts. It's measured on. I know a lot of rich guys that are miserable. Honestly, yeah. I've said this quite a few times in the podcast. My friends that have a lot of money are not handling this pandemic well. But it's the guys that figured things out, and the fact that the little bit of the coincidence that you got the passport and the bond, and then boom, you go to Indonesia, and now it's 20 years later. I mean, that's a job that being a surf guide, I'm using air quotes because it's so much cooler than just a surf guide, that you're in Indonesia, and not, we haven't even brought up your art, and you create this amazing art, and to me, that is that spark. That's that first step. That's just fucking inspiring. So fucking amazing. I just can't. You took the darkest time of your life and somehow changed it and turned it into. I mean, dude, like the beginning of our conversation, you have one of the best waves in the world, and you had it yourself this year.
Yeah, it was madness. And as far as the art thing goes, like, some people, I get people that'll email me and they're like, how do you sell your art? What's the first thing I should do? What should I do? And I'm not sure if I'm doing it right,
Yeah.
But the way I did it was, I've never had a gallery represent me or anything.
Mm-hmm.
But when social media came around, my theory was, since I'm not a super outgoing person, what I did was I started posting them online, and they're not really that big or giant
mm-hmm.
work, and I make them affordable, like a couple $100, like between $200 and $500, right?
Wow.
And that way people can look at it online, and it's not this major commitment, and you don't have a gallery, you don't have to pay, you're not paying for someone to speak for you. You put it online, people see it, they either like it or they don't. And a lot of artists get caught up with, like, perhaps overvaluing their art, mm-hmm. just because it means a lot to them. Mm-hmm. And my work does mean a lot to me, but in the same way, I'm willing to let it go for a couple $100. And if you sit down and stop and you're like, oh, well, I worked on this 50 hours and break it down, you're like, oh, I'm making the same amount of money as if I worked at a fast food restaurant.
Mm-hmm.
And if you break it down that way, sometimes it's like, oh, what am I doing?
Yes.
But in the same way, if you're moving a lot of art, I mean, I'm in sweatpants and bedroom slippers most of the days, like, I'm chilling, and I can drop anything when I am in America, and I can go surfing, go drive to North Carolina and go surf.
Exactly.
It's the quality of life is what it comes down to.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's not an amazing, I don't want to over romanticize it. I live in a tiny 2-bedroom house.
Mm-hmm.
I have a really cool wife, 2 dogs, and just this year we paid off the house, which is amazing.
You made
an amazing feeling.
That's the American dream now.
Yeah, not everyone. Not everyone's gonna be Joe Rogan. Not everyone's gonna be. But dude, you're selling your art. Your house is paid. I mean, that's fucking awesome. I'm so inspired. I'm so inspired right now. I mean, this is crazy, and I can relate with the art as well. So my best friend who did pass away, who I created. Some people know Final Phase Records, and we had that whole history. But he was my favorite artist. He left me he gave me a painting a couple weeks before he passed away, because he never would. He was such a perfectionist, and I was his manager for a while because he couldn't deal with the business side of things with music or his art. And I used to have these conversations you're talking about how much it's worth, and he couldn't let go. And then towards the end of his life, he started actually doing this thing, which I think is so cool. And someday I want to try to do a gallery but he would just take his paintings with Instagram, because he would drive himself crazy trying to come up with a value, and he wouldn't want to sell, and he would just put it on Instagram, leave it somewhere in Manhattan. And definitely, he didn't say this part, but I think I'm almost positive I could picture him definitely probably lurking far away and seeing. And he would, post it on Instagram. Hey, it's right here, blah, blah, blah. And then it became kind of like a hot commodity in New York City towards the end of his life. But I thought that was cool because he couldn't deal with how much was it worth. It would freak him out, and I would come up with these numbers or whatever, and he just never could come up with it. And it's cool that you had a little bit, somewhat of a business sense to come up with a number that you feel comfortable with to sell your art, because it's so hard for artists to come up with that number. It drives them nuts. It's almost not fair. I wish artists never had to worry about business sides of things, because it will drive. I've seen it firsthand. I've managed quite a few DJs and, like I said, artists and all that stuff, and it does drive them. Business drives them nuts, and I wish they never had to deal with that. But once again, Instagram, social media, it does make it a lot easier. The way he thought about it was just give it away, just like almost like throwing it away. He would literally just take these big canvases and just leave them, and he'd post, like I said, post it on Instagram, and then it would be gone.
That's an interesting. Would rather give it away than have to sell it, but at the same time, I know artists that they always price themselves out. Mm-hmm. They wanted so much for stuff, and they're like, that's what it's worth. And I said, what do you sell a picture for now? And he goes, well, I haven't sold any. I said, that's unfortunately what it's fucking worth. I said, so you need to start building. You can't obviously, I guess you can give it away, but if nobody can buy your paintings or nobody has any, it's hard to build demand. Mm-hmm. So you getting yours out for, like you said, a price that's easily palatable for people and not just trying to kill them is going to build your brand. And, maybe you will make big canvases that you're able to get a lot more for. But if nobody knows who you are, say you hadn't sold any, then there would never become a big demand, but you have a lot of, you're known now, and your art is known and it's out there. So that's really, what you have to do.
Yeah. And, another way I got ahead was, say, I started hitting up surf resorts in Indonesia and saying, hey, would you trade art for accommodation, room and board?
Yeah.
And a lot of them were like, yeah, because my art's ocean related. And so, yeah, they would put me up for a couple months.
Oh, wow.
And I would just paint the whole time I was there. And then they would take all the art. And then I would get room and board, surf as much as I want.
Awesome.
And then, and what that led to was the guests would come. They would see me working, these Australian guys, Brazilian guys, French, wherever they're from. Mm-hmm. They'd see me on the veranda working, or they'd see the art on the walls of these resorts, and they'd be like, oh, that's cool. I want one of those, what do you charge for this and that, and I'd always take down their info, and when I get home, I'd hit them up. I'd be like, hey, remember you said you might want a painting? And sure enough, it's like, now that's another income stream. Like, guys, it's a way to meet people without doing the hard sale, you don't have to have a gallery, it's like people meet you along the way. They get to know you by your story a little bit, by your surfing ability, and it just makes it more relatable.
But you got to that point because you were willing to put yourself out there.
Exactly.
Is the ultimate, you have to put yourself and your art out there. And I understand people get attached to stuff, but you got to do what you're doing and get it out there. And that's a great trade-off. You didn't get, a lot of people probably wouldn't do that because they're not getting direct money that they can spend, but you still got value out of those paintings.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Some of those resorts, it's like $300 a night, $500 a night, and you're staying 2 months and just enjoying it. And then a lot of times it led to where, hey, can you take these guys out on the boat? Can you be a guide? Once you learn the conditions around there, that led to the job that I'm doing now. Surf guiding, managing the resort, and being able to speak Indonesian from in between the staff and the guests. That really helps too.
Sounds like a magical place.
It's
It sounds like
that's the podcast I'm working on right now. I'm in the middle of episode 1. I'm trying to go into the history of Neos because it's got this super dark history, man.
oh, really?
These guys were headhunters,
Wow.
and they raided other villages and enslaved them. And it's like it parallels the darkest things that people talk about in conspiracy websites, like royal bloodlines and elite power structure. You know, like, yeah, I'm working on it right now, but
Well, I'll be listening.
just because you're a fan of a podcast doesn't make you a
Yeah.
good podcaster. Is what I'm learning. It's like,
No.
oh my god, this is so difficult.
You can do it, man. You've done a lot. You've done a lot.
Yeah, well,
I think you can do it for sure. I'm pretty certain. But before we wrap it up, I do want to ask, where can everyone find your art?
Oh, the best place is probably Instagram or Facebook. On Instagram, I'm Phil Goodrich Art, and it's got underscores in between that,
Mm-hmm.
in between the words. And Facebook, it's just Phil Goodrich or Phil Goodrich Art, either one.
We'll link. We'll link you in the bios, right, Clint? We'll get them linked up. Phil, we had a little bit of technical difficulties, but I think we're going to need more time. So I'd like to have you back on. I'd like to have you on after you get your podcast going too, because there's more we should have talked about. But we had a little, like I said, we had a little bit of technical difficulties, so we started a little later than we like. But it's been such a pleasure. You're such an interesting guy. You're very an inspiration, I might say too. And I really hope you've inspired some of our Swarm listeners or any of our free thinking fans. I don't know. Clint, you got
that's
anything?
what I wanted to do. I mean, if I wrote down goals and I was like, reach out to some podcasts, because to me, that's the future. And I mean, I don't know how many listeners you have, but even if 1 or 2 people got inspired or got an idea from it, that's what you guys are trying to do. Like Clint, you and Clint, you're doing the comedy club, and laughter is so important. People need to laugh right now, and it's scientifically proven that laughter change your mood and change your life, and so if us having this conversation, if it can inspire like 1 person, 5 people, that's a high-minded goal to have. And then selfishly, like if it turns people onto my art, that's cool too, and turns people onto your restaurant, your comedy club.
Yes.
What are we doing here? It's like the best we can do.
I can't close it out better than that. That was amazing. Phil, that was so much fun. It was great and inspiring. Guys, thank you so much for listening. We love you, Swarm.